Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm gonna explain you my last techno jam. If you haven't checked it out, it sounded like this. Alright, so let's get started. First things is, even though all the sound come out from the TR-6S, the Modular and the DFAM, I use Ableton Live as master clock, my recording tool, and as well some processing like such as delay and effect on each individual track. So first we're gonna go through this a little bit, how to set everything. The first main issue that I had, it was to clock everything and synchronize everything perfectly, which was a bit of a headache because obviously, for example, you have the Korg SQ-1, which is by USB, and you have another one device which is by USB as well, and then after you have as well the DFAM that I have to sync somehow. So in order to do that, I've been in Ableton preferences, and you go to your MIDI, and so here you have TR-6S out, and I have to reduce -82 in order to have this synchronized. So this can change all the time, so once you prepare for record, make sure it's like this and then record, because otherwise you're gonna have to change again and again. Then the way I've done it, the second one, I had to synchronize the Korg SQ-1 sequencer as well, so same process. And so I found out at the time I needed to put was -52 milliseconds. So this way now I had my TR-6S synchronized with the SQ-1, and the final problem was the synchronizing the DFAM. So I tried to use the sync out to plug into the DFAM add clock, but it didn't work for some reason. So I have to use Ableton CV2 to synchronize my DFAM. So I'm lucky to have a Moog 828 Mark II. It's an old sound card, but it got DC coupled input output, which means that I can connect with Modular World using my input and output from my sound card. So what I'm doing basically is I'm sending audio clock from Ableton to the Moog DFAM in order to synchronize my Moog DFAM to Ableton. So that was a tricky one, but to synchronize my DFAM with Ableton, I could have used CV clock out from the Ableton CV tool, but it wasn't synchronized. I couldn't find a way to synchronize it, and there is no latency compensation that I could use. So basically what I've been doing is I've used CV trigger to basically send the trigger to the aft clock of my DFAM. This way it will synchronize the DFAM with Ableton. So I used the output number 6 of my sound card to send this trigger signal to the DFAM, and in Ableton I have a MIDI clip, but you can see here the MIDI notes are off the grid, because if I put them on the grid I have some latency, it's not synchronized. So I will just shift this MIDI note either forward or backward, depending on the way you see it, in order to, with the latency, having my audio synchronized to Ableton. So it's a bit complex, but I hope it makes sense. So this way I can have both my kick and my DFAM synchronized. So that was the first things, to synchronize everything. Huge headache, to be honest, all the time to make sure everything is sync. But yeah, once everything was synced, so the idea for this little jam was to have like small little device that I can use. I have TR-6 for my drums, and I use the low tom for the bass line. Then I have the DFAM, which is kind of playing an hypnotic melody. And then I have the SQ-1, which got two individual sequencers that sequence two different oscillators from my Modular. And I have a dual VCA, so I can take separate output from each oscillator and then bring it back into Ableton. Here I have back my audio from Ableton from the DFAM connected into my sound card, my Moog, and here the audio is going through USB. So alright, so now in Ableton you can see, forget the side chain first, I forgot to remove it, it doesn't do anything. But you can see in black here I have all of the track from my TR-6S. Then here I have the DFAM, and I have Modular A, which is the output A, and the Modular B, which is the output B, and this is the clock that I use to sync the DFAM. And then it's going to a master effect where I call mixdown. So everything is going through this mixdown, and I have a low cut and another effect on that, and then I record everything live. Alright, so now, I have the TR-6S for the drum, and you can see I have on this one the kick drum. So I use the 909 bass 2 is the ACB engine from Ableton for the kick. Here I have a rim shot, which is the 909 ACB engine rim shot. Here I have a low tom, 909 low tom, again ACB engine, but I use as a bass line, and with the kick, that's basically my kick bass line. And then here is not a hand clap, it's a ride. So 909 ride. I've been with 909 sound mainly, except for the two last, which are close hi-hat and open hat, which is a sample, this one. All the rest are from the Roland ACB engine. So that's for all of my drum. And in terms of processing, you see on the kick drum you have a bit of saturation and limiter. It doesn't do much, to be honest. See, it's not a big difference. Then it's just reverb. And drum boost is like more like for the gate. I have the low tom just to it works as well without the effect, but the effect add a bit of movement, so I add them. Then you have a ride. It's mainly just reverb and delay, all the Ableton external processing, but I don't have hardware effect, so I have to use Ableton 1, otherwise everything will have been to a dry and open hat. Alright, so that's for the drums. So now about the DFAM, which is doing this Hypnotic key. It's a basic patch, honestly it's a basic sound, but it's just work. And now let's go into the modular and the sequencer. So I will probably make a later video about this mini setup, but basically you have your oscillator here, and then you have a mixer which is going into a wave folder and the filter, and you have a dual VCA. So here what I've done is I've basically split my modular in two, and I have two different oscillators. I have another third one, but I haven't used it. And I have the first one, which is this noisy things. So here what's happening is I have the SQ-1, the sequence A, which is sequencing. You see all of the color of the blue and the red, they are basically controlling the noisy oscillator, so which one will create my ambience. So the blue one controls the pitch and the red one controls the gate, and I have one of the gate which is going through the envelope as well, because this is a VCA but it's envelope as well, so to trigger the envelope. And here I've shortened straight away from I'm going straight away from the oscillator into the mixer, and then from the mixer straight into the VCA. I don't go through the wave folder and the filter, mainly because I wanted to use the filter and the wave folder for the other oscillator for my lead, and I didn't want it to have the filter affecting this oscillator. And anyway, it's more kind of a texture drawn ambience oscillator, so I don't really need to have filter or wave folding. And anyway, I could still do it with Ableton, where you can see I've had basically this stereo filter, which add a lot of movement. And yeah, that's for the first patch. And then the second voice of the SQ1 is sequencing. So it's going here, you have a multiplier, and so one is for the gate, the gray one, and one is for the pitch, the yellow one. And then I've sequenced both the pitch of the noise engineering module, and then here this one is going into the wave folder Dirty Laundry, which is going into the Neutron filter, and which is going to the VCA. So again, this is a dual VCA, so I could have used one for the drone scent and one for the more lead scent for the second oscillator. And this way here I have output as well, signal out, and I can have independent one. So one is gonna be for the noise, and one is gonna be for my lead, and then I have independent input in Ableton here, where here you can hear now this one. So the noise engineering, and so I have the filter. I have some extra wave folding as well. There is one thing as well. You can see there is this fold cable which is plugged here. So basically, this is connected to Ableton. I use the CV utility in Ableton, and you can see here it's connected to the output 7. So basically, when I modulate this, it's changing the fold. And what I've done is I've mapped this parameter to this fader here. So I could just basically what I'm doing is I'm modulating the fold with this fader. The reason why is because the fold here is kind of in the middle of the cable, and the second reason it's very close to the pitch one, and it happened a lot. Sometimes I modulate and I touch the fader here and I kind of change the sound, which is a bit annoying. So that's why I connect with Ableton, and I have this on the controller, so like this I don't really mess up here, and I can still like so that's something I really like with this oscillator, is because you have modulate, morph, fold, that you can modulate, and it's kind of changing the tone. The melody is pretty simple, but then you can change the tone. So that's what I'm doing during the track. And like by changing that, it's kind of acting like a melody and add a bit more variation. So I do that a lot with modulating the filter, obviously, as well. And during the second part as well, I use the folder, the Dirty Laundry, which again add different variation and different color. I like that because it's kind of, you keep the tone, the original tone of your sound, but you can add variation without changing too much the tone and without having something too different. So that's what I like this module. And this module as well, because you can have a basic melody, but then you have parameter to kind of change the tone, but without changing too much. And you can change the tone in a way like you will modulate a melody, for example. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, then it's going into the filter, and then in filter in the second VCA, they all have this decay envelope as well, modulating to make it a bit more plucky. Here as well, I use the envelope to modulate the filter, so you have a pluckier, like a... You see, you have a bit of filter envelope here applied. The envelope from the VCA. Alright, and that's pretty much it. Then you have this controller. So I use for different reasons. So I've just shown you for the morph of the noise engineering. But you can see here it's controlling the volume of my Modular B voice. So if you go back in Ableton, the 6 is controlling the volume fader of the DFAM. This one is controlling the volume of the voice A of the Modular, and this one of the Modular B voice. And I have another things as well that I'm doing here. I have a fader here. You're gonna hear that I play a lot, especially during the break. So if I go here, you can see here I'm sending to a return. And in this return, you have, it's a rack from Make a Transition that I like to use in my template as well and in my production. It's just a reverb where you create this nice long tail. So it's nice for transition because you can send everything during your breakdown, before to drop. So you can send all of your track basically by just one fader. It's not sending just mod beats, actually sending all of the send B of all of the tracks. So they're all going together except the kick, which is not going, but so that can be nice. I can have a look at, and then so that's cool things you can do. And then you have this one you just see me using. It's basically, if I go on the mixdown track here, you can see it's a locket that can activate, deactivate. This is classic. Your classic locket for your break. And then you have this crossfader, which is mapped to the razor knob here. So this is a rack I've made. It's basically a lot of delay, reverb, create a washout effect. And so I use this crossfader to kind of, I could have used one of the fader, but I found it cool to use this crossfader a little bit. So I hope you like this little breakdown, and I hope you learn a few things. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you soon. Bye-bye.